So I have a question here from a YouTube user called Sheriff Vlogs. And he asks, can you do a video explaining what the loudness war is? Of course. And the loudness war. So the loudness war is basically a war on loudness. It is, it doesn't necessarily come from mastering engineers. It comes from the end user or the producer just going, I want it louder. I want it louder. We get constantly asked by various different clients when we do mastering, can you make it louder? Or the general request when sending the track in is make it as loud as possible. I don't care, just make it as loud as possible. And it's a negative thing. It isn't good for your music. Your music doesn't need to be loud. Because guess what? We have volume knobs where we just go whoop and we turn the volume up. Like you just literally turn the volume up. There's no reason to have this huge, loud, just ridiculously, like, I mean, I've looked at some, like, because we obviously get a sent reference tracks. Like when someone wants it ridiculously loud, they generally send a reference mix or a reference master with it and say, I want it as loud as this. And it's not, you listen to that and you go, blimey, that sounds bad. And it does. It really does sound bad. The only place it might sound good is, you know, if you're off your head in a club or something, it will sound amazing. But generally speaking, the majority of people listening to music don't need it to be ridiculously loud. The loudness war is currently kind of being reset. Streaming brought in a kind of a practice where let's kind of chill this down a bit and let's stop with the whole going as far as we can, because realistically loudness, you've got 0 dB as the ceiling. You can't go louder than that. So that is your ceiling there. You can't go any louder than that. So what you're basically getting is people just going like that, ramming against the ceiling and just kind of sitting there like that with the limiters just smashing the life out of stuff. And then you've got the more professional artists. Well, I mean, I don't mean to say the more professional artists, the artists that are more willing to listen and the artists that kind of understand dynamics and understand how a speaker moves in and out and how it needs dynamics, that just sit underneath that. And they can still go up to that 0 dB and still slam a limiter on there and still maximize that sound as loud as possible, but retain dynamics. There's no reason to sit in there and smash the life out of a song. And there's a few things at the moment that are really good what are happening. You've got Dolby Atmos, which is resetting the kind of loudness war as such. So going forward, when Dolby Atmos pretty much already, like, it will take over, and basically you're now sitting at a -18 LUFS, which is brilliant, because there you're well below 0 dB, or I say well below, but you are below 0 dB, and you're more sitting just flicking into a master, and it sounds amazing. It sounds so much better. Music just sounds so much better. And, you know, if you want it louder, if the user wants it louder, turn the volume up. You don't have to smash the life out of your song, because losing dynamics is bad for your song. Your song doesn't sound any better. The dance music kind of was the genre that really kind of pushed the loudness war. Then you had like rock and stuff like that, where you had remasters. There was a phase in, like, I don't know, about 2000, 2005 maybe, where you were remastering stuff. And it was just like, let's just smash the life out of it and re-release something that's just ridiculously loud, so much so that it's just ridiculously distorted, and it doesn't sound good. But the problem you've got with the whole thing about loudness is that if you listen to two songs, one's really loud and one's really quiet, or not just really quiet, just like nice and dynamic, everybody will say the really loud one, or majority of people will say the really loud one is better. And it's not, because if you match the volumes, if you brought that one's volume down and match the two volumes of the dynamic version and the really loud, overly compressed version, you will always pick the more dynamic version. But it's because it's instantly louder that you go towards that, and that's the problem, and why there is a loudness war, is because the user, the end user who's buying the music or listening to the music, will put one on, and if it's a lot louder, will instantly think, well, that one's better. And it's something that's being reset. The loudness war over the past, I'd say the past 3 years, the loudness war has kind of started to reset. There's still people that want these really loud masters, but generally speaking, they are the people that are going into the clubs, rather than releasing their music on, let's say, Spotify, places like that, because it just doesn't, a ridiculously loud master does not translate well onto streaming, and that's just fact. It just doesn't. So what is the loudness war? The loudness war is basically people trying to get one up on the next guy. My track's louder than your track. I'm louder. No, I'm louder. Going all the way up. And basically it's a smoke. I guess it's kind of a smoke screen for the songs. I'm going to make mine as loud as possible so that it sounds better than this guy's, whose is a little bit quieter, but my song will be perceived as better because it's louder. And that is basically what the whole loudness war is. For me personally, as a mixing engineer, as a mastering engineer, I would always favour a more dynamic master, and a more dynamic mix, and just like generally more dynamics, because the way I can perceive music is better when it has dynamics. I understand that I have a volume knob that I can just turn up. Every device has a volume knob. You could turn any device up. You could turn a phone volume up. You can turn everything up. So by doing so, you cut out this whole smash to life out of a song. So yeah, the loudness war is just basically people trying to get one up on each other and be the loudest one. Now, for me, perceived loudness is far more beneficial than actual loudness. How you actually perceive, and this is an art. This is what kind of, in a way, what people, when people talk about like the dark art of mastering and things like that, is the way I see it is that mastering engineers, they know how to get a perceived loudness. So you will listen to it and perceive that song as being louder than a song that is technically louder, but you perceive this one because it has more dynamics, because of the way that it is mixed, because of the way it is mastered. It is perceived as louder, although it's not. But your ears will tell you that it is louder, and that's the art of, in my eyes, the art of mastering, the art of mixing and things like that, is getting that perceived loudness rather than this ridiculously smashed loudness. And it's relatively hard to do, but if you know how to do these sorts of things and perceive it, how to make an audience perceive a song as louder or brighter but not being too bright, things like that, it's all part of the art of mastering. So yeah, I mean, that is basically what the war on mastering is. It's something that's quite a dated thing, like 2000 on to 2015. There was a big loudness war, and it never seemed to stop. And the problem was there was this 0 dB, which was the kind of ceiling and the stop point, but people still managed to kind of push and push and push and go louder and louder and louder. I mean, I've heard some songs which are ridiculously loud, and they don't sound good. They sound horrendous. They really do sound horrendous. But in a club, would sound most probably great, but in a listening setting where you're listening to them, you hear distortion, you hear all sorts. There's artifacts. It's not good for music, this whole ridiculously loud. And like I said before, the whole thing with the Dolby Atmos thing and the reset button. When I spoke to Dolby, the whole kind of the idea behind it was one of the ideas behind it is that we can put a reset button on this kind of loudness war and bring it back. And -18 LUFS is a brilliant volume. That is a great kind of ceiling. But that's what they're kind of, that's the -18 integrated is the ceiling that's basically, you can't go further than that. And if you do, you will get the song gets rejected from the streaming platform, which, as long as that is the case and it is put into place that the song is rejected, that becomes the ceiling. That's now that's now the new 0 dB, which is brilliant, because then every single track has a lovely dynamics, has a great sound. And listening back in Dolby Atmos, if you want it a little bit louder, turn it up, because at the end of the day, once you get onto one of these streaming platforms, a ridiculously loud master on one of these streaming platforms, it just brings the volume down. It's totally counterproductive. It really is. And like I said before, the only time that it's going to be beneficial, or it's going to sound okay, is in a club. So a ridiculously loud master might sound great on a club system where people are off their nuts, and nobody's listening to the distortion, and they would probably put it down to the system rather than the song. But you put that onto a streaming platform, and it's like, it's not going to sound good, and it doesn't. And that is fact, because I've listened to these ridiculously loud masters once, gone on to streaming platforms to listen for my own kind of curiosity. And it is fact that they sound terrible once on a streaming platform. They don't sound good because the loudness is brought down, and it's just pointless. And it's more. I feel like the loudness war it's taken like 15 years to educate, or rather for people to talk about why it's wrong and why you can benefit from having a more dynamic master. And generally speaking, more people are educated on it now, or rather, they're not necessarily educated on it. They just kind of read a few forums about -14 LUFS, and then they're like, "Oh, you've got to be -14 LUFS to be on Spotify," and it's not the case. And there's a lot of conflicting information out there that really, I mean, as from a mastering engineer's perspective, majority of it is it's ridiculous information. You go on some of these forums, and the people talking about it, they're just regurgitating old information that was wrong then and is still wrong now, but they are still just kind of spilling it out. And people are believing it. It's kind of like how the car test still is about. The whole car test thing. It's still about, because people are still recommending it. And I don't know if someone. I don't know. That's another video. But just, I mean, the best thing to do with regards to the loudness war is don't go into the don't go into the war. Don't entertain it, because people are releasing music with far more dynamics nowadays. And whenever someone says to me, make it really, really loud, make it this, make it that, I want it as loud as possible, I'm kind of thinking to myself, it's not 2015 anymore. We've progressed from there. Things have changed, and I'd love for everybody to kind of be educated on the fact of what the loudness war is, and that's why these videos are quite helpful. And I just, I give my opinion on it. Whether you want to listen to me, and whether you want to start making more dynamic mixes or more dynamic masters, that's entirely up to you. But as a mastering engineer that releases music and hears the music that goes out, hears the music here, does do loud masters, does do more dynamic masters, does listen to those dynamic masters and those less dynamic masters, and hears them streaming back. I know for fact that loud masters don't sound good once on Spotify and Apple Music and them sorts of platforms. The best masters are the more dynamic ones. But like I say, you take those tracks into a club and a DJ plays them, they sound a lot better. And to the general listener who's in a club, a big loud master does sound really impactful, and I would say it does sound better than a track that has a full dynamic range. But from a listener perspective and enjoying the music outside of a club, a more dynamic master is far better.